Mine's just Tom.
Like Madonna. All right, welcome to Our Experience, an ASCP podcast. We're coming out of last week's show where we talked a little bit about fear and kind of coming to grips with some of the challenges that the industry faces, and had a great conversation about that. And we're going to pivot the other 180 degrees this week and talk about hope. So, as many of you know, the first Star Wars, even though it's the fourth Star Wars, is titled A New Hope, which is why I put my land speeder out here in front so everybody could see it. But let's be honest. I mean, the aging population and the contemporary use of medication has created an intersection in healthcare that is profound. Part of the reason that we're invested in long-term care has to do with that intersection. So pharmacists with experience and pharmacists that have really attacked this market do have a lot of hope. So we're going to talk today to one of those pharmacists that really exudes hope and investment in the long-term care space. I'm Chad Wers. I'm the Chief Executive for the American Society of Consultant Pharmacists. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Tom Hansel. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing good, and we're excited to have our next guest on. Chad's got the Star Wars piece there, but I'm wearing the Ted Lasso Believe shirt. So I've enjoyed Ted Lasso, and we'll use a few Ted Lasso puns here today. But without further ado, we'd like to introduce Lobby after you, who's from MMP, Medication Management Partners, up in Chicagoland area. Lobby, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Pleasure and honor to be joined with you two legends of the industry.
Thank you. That feels good.
This feels old, but
yeah.
So, Lobby, tell us a little bit about MMP, specifically what you guys are doing, kind of your presence there in the Chicago area, and then also give us a little background on you yourself personally.
Sure. Well, I'll start myself. I'm a pharmacist. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma in 2004. And I'm by way of Southeastern Europe, the Balkans, an independent country now known as Republic of Kosovo, former Yugoslavia at the time when I lived there and left. Came as a foreign exchange student to the United States in '94 in Oklahoma, and then finished high school there and finished my degree there as well. And then I believe it was my second or third year of pharmacy school, I did an internship with Walgreens. I was working as an intern at a Walgreens close to my pharmacy school, and then decided to do an internship with their corporate that they had every summer and select 6 students. I don't know if that program is still around, but at the time they selected 6 students from across the country and set them up in Deerfield to do a 12-week internship with Walgreens, and fell in love with Chicago and decided that that's where I wanted to live when I finished pharmacy school. And then once I finished pharmacy school, I did a residency program with Brian Jensen up in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, a community pharmacy practice residency. And that's when I was first exposed to, I'd seen compounding before in Oklahoma, but long-term care, especially community-based environments and settings. So Brian had an interesting pharmacy where he was really dabbling in a lot of stuff, ambulatory care, kind of disease management, like diabetes, hypertension, through some employers that were paying for their folks to get this additional treatment and support from the local pharmacy. And then he was doing compounding and compliance packaging for local assisted living communities. So that was kind of the first time I had been exposed to it. Right. And then once I finished the residency, I moved to the Chicagoland area where I met my partners now and opened up MMP in 2010. Really, so that goes back now 13 years. We just saw an opportunity where, you could see senior living, kind of the residential care community settings where the big players were, had the resources, but were treating it very much like an institutional setting. And we felt like it could be done better. And so that's where MMP started in 2010. We, had a small 300 square foot room that we started out of, kind of a combo shop to begin with about 10 communities, just about 1,000 to 1,100 residents. Fast forward now, we have somewhere close to 180 communities, close to 9,000 lives that we are providing services and care for, across 13 states. So it's been a very interesting and rewarding journey.
That's awesome. I'm gonna call you out a little bit. I don't think I knew that you were from Oklahoma, so you're a boomer sooner.
But that's right.
Do you know what that means? I'm assuming.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Sooners were the first folks that came into Oklahoma when the territory was open. They crossed before midnight, which is why they were known as Sooners.
That's so great, and I love that. Like,
yeah.
So you came from that pioneering environment, and as a pharmacist, you're a pioneer in pharmacy, particularly in long-term care. So that's a good tie to hope.
Not to mention that he was foreign born and came there as
right.
Sorry to interrupt, but like, every time I tell that story, folks kind of ask, why Oklahoma? You're coming from Europe, and how was that like? And I have to tell you, it was phenomenal. I had a host mom, as every foreign exchange student does. Her name's Terry Bryant. And she was phenomenal. The high school I went to, met great friends. I think maybe I was somewhat of a novelty being from Eastern Europe and Oklahoma, but was felt really welcomed and was able to make friends really, really quickly, and just have a lot of fond memories of being in that part of the country. I'm a big fan of. I spent a little bit of time in Texas as well. My youngest sister. So, anyways, fast forward. I have two sisters who have all migrated to the U.S. over time. My youngest sister now lives in Texas as well. I spent a year in Texas before I went to Oklahoma. I went to Baylor University my freshman year, and so that whole part of the country, I'm just a big fan of.
That's a great story. I love that. And I mean, that has to play a role in your entrepreneurial spirit and your willingness to take risks and how you've been so successful building your business. That's cool.
So the landscape back in 2010, and I'm proud to say that I spent time in Chicago myself. I graduated from Chicago College of Pharmacy, Midwestern University. It was a little bit before 2010, but it doesn't really matter at that point. But I do know that long-term care well in that area, and it's highly, highly competitive. There's several very well-known long-term care pharmacies in the Chicago area. When you were co-founding MMP, what was your thought process on, hey, we can do this and we can do it different, we can differentiate ourselves, because the competition it was and it still is pretty stiff? Yeah, I don't know that it always matters that you're the first, right? I think, not to go on a tangent, but like even big companies like Apple, they're not the first with every product. It's usually about the quality and what you see as the opportunity is. And so even though there's many pharmacies in general, I mean, sure, in Chicago, whether it's long-term care or now 340B and compounding pharmacies, I think it's all about identifying where the white space is, what the opportunity exists, even within a particular vertical. So I think when you say long-term care, there's a lot of different niches that kind of fall within that, right? And so you have pharmacies that do really well in kind of the more acute skilled nursing setting or nursing home setting. And you have pharmacies that do, really well in the more ICFDD setting, whether it's developmental disability or even behavioral health. And then you have the setting of where we kind of decided we felt like there was a white space primarily in congregated senior living,
And we just felt at the time that there was really not a pharmacy that focused on it. And so I think a lot of the times it's, the definition of luck that I'm a big fan of is Oprah's definition of, preparation meets opportunity. And so from a preparation perspective, what is it that you as a business owner, or as a pharmacist, as a professional can do to further your skill sets, to develop your business acumen, to invest in, and then looking for opportunities. And when those opportunities present themselves, and they're not always clear, right? There's not always kind of every once in a while they are. You could kind of very clearly see the path. But sometimes they're not very clear. You kind of dabble into something and you figure out that you're either really good at it or not, and then you move on. But I think it's that. I think it's investing in yourself, your team, and your resources, technology. And then when the opportunity presents itself, you have a better shot than most. And so while there's a lot of competition in Chicago, I think you look at it two ways. Well, there's a lot of competition, which probably means there's a lot of opportunity.
Right.
Well,
And so how you frame your mindset, I think makes a big difference in terms of how you approach that situation.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there that I really like. I like your comment about finding the white space. I mean, you'll hear different entrepreneurs across different industries talk about finding the answer to a problem. You have to define the problem and then define the answer. You can't do something and then go search for the problem. And entrepreneurs do a very good job of that. And your comment about white space is finding that area that's not being well managed or handled well, and building something around that. And I think that this time in the demographic shift that's going on in this country and really in some other places around the world, the white space is not the nursing home. The nursing home, we've talked to a lot of longtime ASCP members, early leaders and innovators, and in their time, the nursing home was the white space. It was brand new, and nobody really understood the complexities of dealing with medication management in those sectors. And over time, it's a stagnant environment. There's 15,439 nursing homes. That's the way it's been for the last 20-something years. But the people are growing at an incredible rate. So they're in assisted living. They're in the community. They're in different forms of living environments in the community. And I think that's, where people like you, other pharmacists out there looking for what should I do with my practice should be sort of exploring, is how do I become somebody that provides quality in this sort of new white space that's out there.
I have to speak about my partners to kind of back into the entrepreneurial aspect.
Sure.
Because I think it's really interesting. It just speaks to a lot of what you just talked about, Chad. So I have two other partners that are in MMP. Dave Dobeck and his family are third-generation family pharmacy business owners. So their grandfather started a retail pharmacy inside of a clinic, a doctor's clinic. Or he was either a doctor or dentist close to Midway in the late 50s. So, your traditional kind of retail pharmacy of the time, right? The father, Don Dobeck, took over along with his wife, Dottie. And then in the 80s, they expanded into medical supplies. And then they were kind of they were a pioneer in that space of providing disposable medical supplies, ostomy bags, etc. And they developed a great reputation in the Chicagoland area as kind of a go-to, especially if you are on public aid. And so diabetic supplies became a big component of that as well. And then through that relationship, when the third generation took over, Dave and his siblings, they really expanded that to provide those medical supplies within the community living, senior living communities. And so that entrepreneurial, that looking for that white space, I think you see that across, usually with pharmacists that are successful, you see it. You just kind of constantly are turning over, every rock to see where you can solve problems, like you said. And the other part of that is just networking, building relationships, right? I think that's what those things do. So that entrepreneurial spirit, runs through, my partners, their family, myself, and then our other partner, whom Dave met through his relationship, servicing his senior living communities in the medical supply space. He was an owner-operator, left the operations business, owner in the senior living, kind of really the full continuum. Started off as a nursing home guy, transitional care, kind of high acuity, one of the pioneers in Illinois for the affordable assisted living space. So an entrepreneurial person in and of his own right. I think you see that in that long-term care space as well. There's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in that side as well. And so, without talking and networking and solving each other's problems, that kind of, those two sparks never come together to create, kind of what becomes the flame. And I think part of that is, sometimes we get so consumed with just like our own little bubble, the, blinders with your day-to-day challenges, which are real. They're problematic. And look, fear is a powerful instinct. We evolutionarily as individuals, fear, help us keep us alive. So it's an emotion that is instinctual and it's real. It's very powerful. And I think it really takes an effort to turn that down, broaden your horizon, invest on working on the business as much as working inside the business, cultivating relationships, whether it's through conferences and associations you belong to, relationships with other pharmacists or other providers, and then keep it in a positive mindset so that when an opportunity, nobody wants to do business with a curmudgeon, right? So if you're going to see the world in kind of a negative view, I think it limits your opportunities. I mean, that's just my opinion. So, I could be wrong. There's plenty of guys that have done things a lot bigger and better than I have. But
for sure.
That's just my view.
So I've got a Ted Lasso quote here, sticking with my theme on believing here, and he says, "Trust your gut, and on the way down, check in with your heart. Between those two things, you'll know what to do." How much of this that you guys have done has been instinct, passion, and kind of the mixture? Kind of give me that, put me in that mindset, because certainly you brought up the word fear. I think as any new business adventure, you certainly have doubt and fear and that kind of stuff that can creep in. But you guys forged ahead and you believed in yourselves, and you believed in the opportunity in the white space. But part of that came from instinct, and part of that came from passion. So tell me kind of how that evolves for you personally.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I think the fear and anxiety, I think, is one of those things where it's like it's either a motivator or it paralyzes you, right? And so I think that's one. It's okay. What do you do in the face of challenges and opportunities? Are you going to just kind of take it lying down, or are you gonna really figure out, okay, what else can be done here? And then I think instinctually, maybe that answers that question. I guess if your instinct is, I'm not going to just sit here and take it, deal with it, kind of a path that seems like is going nowhere, and so I'm going to go out there and just actively pursue opportunities. I think that is an instinct. And look, you absolutely have to have passion. I would think in everything you do, but you both know how challenging and difficult our line of work is. And I think whether it's a retail pharmacy, a compounding pharmacy, a long-term care pharmacy, an IV pharmacy, whatever it is that you do, it's challenging. It's hard stuff. At the crux of it, you've got, patients who are trusting in you with their life, with their well-being. And so that's a big burden. And, and then on top of that, everything else that happens, you have to deal with regulatory-wise, and PBMs, et cetera. So it's complicated, and you have to have a passion for the right thing, and that has, whatever that is for you. For us, it's about improving quality of life and simplifying pharmacy. That's been our guiding light the entire time. Mm-hmm. Every decision we make, we filter it through those two things. Is it improving the quality of life for the patients, the residents that are trusting us with their health? And is it simplifying pharmacy for them and their caregivers and their loved ones? And if it is, then okay, great. Now, how can we do it better, faster, more efficiently?
Right.
If it isn't, then we want to stop doing it, because there's just there's no time or resources to waste in that. And then as you do that within the existing space, from an instinctual perspective, okay, where else could you see your services, that approach benefiting? And again, I think sometimes you try something, and we've had examples where we've gone into markets or we've tried things out a year, 2 years, 3 years, and we learn, and we either learn that this is awesome and we can be really effective at that, or this is really not within our sweet spot, and you move on. And you have to have some tolerance for that. But I think as long as that passion and that vision for what you're looking to accomplish is you stay true to that, and it's core to it, then I think it's a worthy endeavor, when was it? Maybe last week, I had a chance to spend some time with Lenny Parker, and, just even his story and how it kind of, ended up to PillPack with his son, TJ. It's a lot of similarities, right? I mean, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of just kind of experimenting, some maybe some grand vision that others thought was crazy or you couldn't do, or.
And I think that, I'm glad you brought him up, because that was part of the conversation around fear. Is that every time, even Mark Cuban to some degree, every time something happens in pharmacy that big, Amazon buys a pharmacy, Mark Cuban enters the drug pricing space and starts a pharmacy. That was the crux of the fear argument, was pharmacists that exist and are out there are like, oh my God, this is the end. Amazon's going to take over. But there's that other side, and you're part of that other side, which is, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to go out and do what I know is right and what is best, and I'm going to perform, and I'm going to execute and deliver for my patients and the clients that we have. And I'm not going to worry about necessarily what other people are doing, as long as I'm doing it successfully and in the right way. And I'm going to pivot a minute and maybe focus a little bit on assisted living, because you're right in that wheelhouse. But I've always been interested, because assisted living is between skilled nursing and the community for a lot of older Americans. In many places, it's more of a hospitality model than it is a care model. And it's very broad. There could be, out west, I know there are 8-10 person communal houses basically that are identified as assisted living. And then there are memory care centers that most of us that have worked in the industry for a while would say that looks a lot like a nursing home. It's locked. They take care of people with dementia and other conditions. How do you see that changing over the next 5 years as we really get an influx of people in the over 65 and even in the over 80 population? Does the government have to step in at some point and say, we've got to invest in this because people need this level of care, and B, we've got to provide some definition to it, because right now it's just kind of all over the place? How do you see that?
Yeah, I was at a roundtable yesterday with some of these questions were being asked, and I think it's interesting. I mean, look, I met a pharmacist at MHA last month who has a pharmacy in Northern California that is servicing those very same ALs you're referencing, 8 to 15 bed small communities, and is doing great, and is loving what he's doing, and is doing really, really well. I think there's kind of a lot of things to unpack there. I mean, certainly if you look at the demographics, you see a huge wave of potential need, right? And then you kind of put that huge number of folks against the fact that everybody knows that the savings that those same boomers probably cannot afford, at least not all of them, and maybe not even the majority of them, to live in a lot of these communities. And like any other business, the senior living operators have been hit with a huge, operational expense over COVID, and labor's gone. That's a heavy labor, heavy industry where
sure,
we can automate a lot of things, and they can deploy technology, but at the end of the day, it's a people business, right?
Right.
And a lot of technology that's being deployed nowadays is how do you keep people in their homes longer? So that shift in acuity down from hospitals to nursing homes to assisted living is probably just going to continue. I just started rewatching The Sopranos, and like that's been 23 years ago. And the first season's all about, Tony Soprano and trying to move his mom into, quote unquote, a retirement community, right? And she doesn't want to go in a nursing home. It's not a nursing home, it's a retirement community. So there's a lot of those same conversations being had now about, well, is it really senior living? The boomers are really don't view themselves as quote unquote senior. So you'll see now active adult. Well, what does that mean? So I think there's a combination. Yes, you probably are going to have some government subsidy. That comes with strings, right? Regulations.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Things that I think the industry learned from nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities that they probably would like to avoid in the assisted living space. And so they'll have to figure out kind of what's good, what's not. I think you've seen it in the affordable living space. And I think what a lot of operators will tell you is it's not necessarily a moneymaker for them. If you're having on assisted living, affordable kind of subsidized assisted living.
Yep.
Maybe there is an aspect where if you have 10 or 15% of your residents in some form of subsidized program, maybe it works, whether it's Medicaid or maybe VA, opening up VA benefits so that they pay for some of these services. I think by and large, what I see happening really is operators figuring out how can they deliver the optimal amount of care that individuals can afford. And that can probably take a lot of different shapes, but the one that probably seems the most likely to me is some kind of a value-based care alignment with payers like Medicare Advantage. And whether that is through profit sharing or savings sharing or just resources that the entity at risk is able to put into their communities, i.e. labor, that could then help them defray some of those payroll costs. Think of like some kind of a care concierge or a care coordinator that helps coordinate all the different ancillary providers and services that are flowing through their buildings. I think that's probably the most likely outcome. But you may have, in certain pockets, in certain segments, some level of government direct, Medicaid or other VA, other contribution. But I think by and large, the industry would prefer to steer clear of that and, regulate themselves,
Yeah, right.
Really keep it at the state level.
Right.
Or control it.
Yeah.
Control it by being ahead of it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, here we are 13 years later, and you have a direction your company's headed towards, and guys have had a lot of great accolades. I know that you've invested a lot into technology, but you've also invested in your people. And I saw that this was voted as one of the better places to work or a great place to work, I think up in Chicago area for 2 consecutive years in a row.
That's awesome.
Those type of things don't happen because people are disgruntled. I mean, this is during the COVID period and whatnot. Those things happen because management invests into their own staff to create that type of environment and culture. So I know that's very important to you. I know technology is important to you, and I've worked with you closely over the years on that. But coming from the perspective of, if I was going to start a pharmacy from scratch, day one, what would be the top couple, 2 or 3 things that you must do now, knowing that you've got 13 years of experience doing this?
Yeah.
Well, what are the top 2 or 3?
Well, look, they don't teach us how to run businesses in our, pharmacy school or medical school or anything like that,
true.
right? And in the end of the day, and I think a lot of it has to speaks to the ability to learn about opportunities and then execute on those opportunities is all based on people, having the right people in the right seat that you invest in. And so I think the number one thing that I did not know, and I learned over time, and I would have liked to have spent more time learning up front, is just how do you structure and organize an entity, and that's people, process, and plan. I think investing in that is really, really important. We take a lot of pride in the fact that we've actually 3 years running greatest places to work, and that's a national award. It's not. Yeah, it's not an annual award. 2020, 2021, and 2022, and we're going to go through that review again. And so, without having, even more so now in the labor environment that we're in, but I'm just so glad that we invested in this 5-6 years ago. We started investing in people. That's number one. You really need to make sure that you get really clear on your vision, your core values, the behavioral traits that you're looking for, and how you're going to structure the organization, and then finding the right people that can help you get there. I'm a big fan of surrounding yourself with way smarter and more capable people than you are. If you're not, then yeah, you're going to have to solve every problem, which is not going to leave you a lot of time to look for opportunities, right? And so I think people is number one.
I love that people's number one.
Yeah, in my opinion, that's number one.
It's
really,
easy
and
for
I think,
me
look,
to
it's the
surround
same thing
myself
with
with people that are more capable
Yeah.
and smarter. I got that down packed.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's people. Your customers, your clients are people as well. So
Right.
I think you're investing in your people internally. You're investing in your clients and customers as well. If you are a transactional business and you thrive in transactional kind of relationships, then that's fine. For us, we're really a partnership-based business. It's a relationship-based business. If we get a sense that it's true transactional, whether it's with an employee or with a client, then we kind of level set that and make sure that, hey, if it makes sense for both parties, that's fine. But if it doesn't, we're not going to jump through unnecessary hoops for transactional relationships, whether that is an employee or a client, right? There's kind of a threshold where, yeah, there's going to have to be some transactional opportunities per diem, some part-timers, but full-timers and folks that we have internally, if it becomes too transactional, if we're transactional with them, then we're not holding our end of the bargain. If they're too transactional with us, then they're not a right fit. It's the same thing with our relationships with the partner communities we're with. If it's too transactional, then it's just it's not our cup of tea. We'll move on. And that's just it. So you've got people, and then it's your process. I'm a big fan of being. You've got to be committed to a process, and technology factors into that. Just repeatability. If you're able to be very consistent, you're measuring what matters. You can inspect what you expect, and you're constantly learning to get better. Just the continuous quality improvement mindset, that quality excellence mindset operationally. I think that's key in our industry. It's table stakes, but you can't get there with the wrong people, right? So it's your people, your process, and then your plan. And the plan, look, I mean, the plan, we set a plan for the way we plan our for us is we use something called Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS traction. It's really designed to help small businesses kind of organize themselves and, just get really clear on what they're looking to accomplish and achieve. And that's what we do. And the vision traction organizer that we call kind of is laid out on, okay, what's our BHAG, kind of the big, hairy, audacious goal. And, for us, that is 25,000 residents in the next, 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
So we want to be able to service 25,000 residents in the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? Then you get back into 3 years. We want to get to double our size where we're at today to about roughly around 12,000 to 14,000 residents by, 2026. And then you back into the 1-year plan, your 1-year goals. Okay, now what do you have to achieve this year to get to that 3-year picture? So then you set your 1-year goals, and then you break it into, okay, so now what do you need to do in the next 90 days to get to your 1-year goal? So really creating a plan for yourself that you can execute like anything else, right? How do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So it's, okay, state your big vision, and then you got to back into, okay, now how do I get there? And then break that into smaller chunks, because then people get motivated, right? Because they're accomplishing things and they see you're kind of building momentum. It's like a snowball. You just start building momentum. I remember when we were at 2,500 residents, and I think I was at a Parada meeting. We were maybe at 25 or 300 residents, and I made a comment that, our goal was to double and be at 5,000 residents. I think at the point it was like in 2 years. And, I've had people who told me afterwards that nobody believed me that I could do that. That they had heard, many people. I think Tim Hutchison was actually one of Framework. He was like, you know what, man, so many people come to me and say, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I did not think that you guys would be able to do it. Well, 2,500 turned to 9,000. Well, it didn't turn into 9,000 overnight, right?
Right.
It requires that people process plan. From my perspective, it requires that people process plan. Now, there's pharmacists that have done bigger and better things than I, and so I think that can, there's different ways to kind of approach that. But that's what's worked for us.
I think that's awesome. I'm going to pull you back for one more little tidbit, because I really liked what you said about thinking of assisted living in the context of Medicare Advantage and having the services be, a value-based partnership between some of those Advantage plans and the assisted living centers. How does pharmacy play a role in that? And even further than that, obviously we're spending a lot of time thinking about people living in their homes longer, but needing some of the services that pharmacies like yours provide. And you have some experience with that in the assisted living space. Is that a path for pharmacists to do more for people in their home if they qualify or feel like they need these extended services? How do you see that?
The short answer is yes. I do think that's the future. I do think pharmacists have a huge opportunity in that regard. I will tell you specifically, there's got to be an alignment, not just with pharmacists, with all service providers in this space of taking care of, long-term care residents, patients, whether they're at home or in any other setting. There's got to be an alignment between those service providers, pharmacy, hospice, rehab, physicians, payers, with the operator, and most importantly, the resident. And I think right now we're stuck in this kind of fee-for-service model where it's just long-term. I don't think that's sustainable. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is, whether it's 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, but the idea that you can just indefinitely just pump, a huge number of prescriptions and just make a profit doing that, I just don't see that being the only path forward. And so whether that is some kind of a risk sharing, whether that is some kind of an outcomes based, I do think it will get to that point. For us, between now and then, that's been part of our strategy, is we want to align ourselves with the operator. And so there's some decisions we make in terms of how we execute and what value we think will bring to the operator and the resident doing that. But one of the key advantages that we feel we bring to the table is our model, allows us to optimize the therapy of the resident, because we can support a broader number of residents across a larger geography. And so we're not as dependent on having, say 5,000 Mrs. and Mr. Smiths on 15 plus meds. That's why our goal is 20 to 25,000, because, if we can get 20 to 25,000 residents on optimal therapy, and whether that's 8 meds for them or 4 meds for them or 10 meds, whatever that is, we can align our incentives with the operators, because they don't want a lot of meds in their buildings.
Right.
There's an article that came out yesterday in Argentina. Most patients don't want to take a lot of meds. In fact, I think there was like 20% of the patients have started voluntarily themselves initiating conversations with their prescribers about deprescribing.
Right.
And most patients, like 87 or 90% of them, would like to stop meds if their prescriber agreed to do so. Well, I think that's just a matter of aligning incentives, and that is a big focus for us. We want to be prepared for that. And so we are doing a lot of work up front now, and have been for some time, to set ourselves up to be the best-in-class pharmacy provider that has their incentives aligned with the operator's incentives. And so, I think to do that, you've got to be able to have, again, the people process plan in place so that you can support a broad patient base. Because in the environment we're in today, you're still fee for service. So now the question becomes, okay, well, how do you make money? You still, for this time being, it's like, okay, we want to aggregate prescriptions, but over a larger patient population base as opposed to a smaller population base. Right. And I think there's just kind of going to be stepping stones to get from where we are today to an environment where we're getting paid for outcomes.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I know that you all recently released I think it was on LinkedIn, I saw it on information, how you're actually taking another new adventure, another step with incorporating AI, I believe, with health records. You want to talk a little briefly about how your guys are not resting in your laurels, and you're blazing a trail here, if you will, in this area.
Yeah, look, I think there's many of pharmacies that have done some really cool things, kind of a coordinated approach with other ancillary services, whether there's rehab, physician groups, and those are all things that we are pursuing and have pursued and continue to work on. But obviously, there's such great opportunity now with machine learning and all these powerful software tools and, Chat GPT and artificial intelligence. And I think there's a huge opportunity to be very proactive, to tone down the noise of all the false alerts, the false positive, and really identify the true high-risk flags and interventions, and then providing meaningful, concise recommendations. And a way to do that is to be able to pull information that we don't have access to today. And so we are actively working with EHRs so that we can get access to, the resident's pulse and blood pressure and potentially labs if they're in there, and blood glucose readings. And then, using applications and tools that monitor those over an extended period of time, 20, 25 readings. And then, then bouncing that against the pharmacy records, the drug list, and truly bubbling up to the top opportunities where the pharmacist can intervene and have a meaningful recommendation. Right. And it's still in a pilot phase for us, but we're really excited about it. And those are types of things that where it's it's not defined today. Everybody's kind of just thinking about what the future might look like. But you have to invest the time, and you have to have the right people. If I was the only one working on that, I wouldn't have the time to do it. And we have a great team. Tom, you've met Moody and Patrice. We talked about all these folks that we have, and Brenda and Sam and Dave, and then they have their teams, and so looking at all these things, we found an opportunity where it's like, okay, there's an application that's been successful in the acute setting, in a hospital setting. They're interested to explore the post-acute space. We're experts in this post-acute space from a pharmacy perspective. We have great relationships in the EHR space. That's where you become a connector, a networker. You kind of, you try to align your incentives, what you're looking to accomplish, what they're looking to accomplish. And then in the end, some of it may work, some of it may not. But those are the things that we're looking for is, okay, how do you leverage technology so we can be very effective and efficient? So we're excited about it.
Well, that's all. I mean, and that's, what this particular show has been about is that hope, and that, hope isn't a strategy, but when you see people investing, when you see people innovating, when you see people applying new tools that come to fruition and making their businesses better, it gives all of us some level of hope that, hey, this is a viable industry. This has a future. For those young pharmacists out there that are getting into this industry at this point in time, I really feel like it's this pivotal time where they need to be shown that there are people out there making interesting investments, innovating, building new types of businesses in pharmacy, because that's sort of the cycle we're in.
Right.
And they need to be inspired, and that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
People like Lobby.
Absolutely.
So Lobby, totally appreciate it.
Right, plenty of other folks that have done and will continue. I mean,
Sure.
The great thing about this industry is that we are very entrepreneurial. We really are. I mean, this space, pharmacy is just super entrepreneurial. And here's the other thing about pharmacies. We've had to deal with these pressures longer than most other healthcare providers.
Yep.
I mean, you go back to the 80s, right? Pharmacists have been figuring out, even before that, right? We were compounding initially before pharma started mass manufacturing. So you could probably go back 60, 70, 80 years, and just that spirit of innovation, entrepreneurialism, I think is really, really ingrained. And it's a mindset. It's yes, there's challenges. And I think it's not an ostrich of like, hey, you stick your head in the sand and don't acknowledge the challenges. Yes, they're out there. But then what are you going to do about it, right? I think there's plenty of opportunity. We have plenty of know-how, and we have just that DNA that goes back decades that is within this industry. And there's plenty of those folks still around, Lenny Parker and others. And I mean, Marcus Wilson with Integrity just recently, he's had a couple of really successful ventures. Tom's been very successful in his own right. So there's a lot of folks that have done really, really well, have done really cool things, and that's cool in this industry. And for young folks coming in to know that there's plenty of people that have done it at a high level, continue to do it, and they're, more importantly than that, what's really, really cool is, by and large, most folks in this space are not just willing, they're eager to share their experience, right, and to be a soundboard or to be an advisor.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think that aspect of it is another really cool thing about our industry.
Yeah.
And it's neat.
Yeah, you've said it a couple times. It's the networking, it's the collaboration. Chad and I are sitting here from completely different backgrounds, but both in long-term care, and we have a common interest, which is long-term care pharmacy, and that's what brought us together to do this podcast. It's that network and collaboration, together. And we've been in long-term care for 20-something years, and we're going to continue to be in long-term care for the rest of our lives. But I've got one more Ted Lasso quote to leave us off with. He says here, "It may not work out how you think it will or how you hope it does, but believe it will. But if you believe it will, it'll all work out." And Lobby, you've been a prime example of that over the past 13 years, and I know that you're going to continue helping lead our industry in innovation and creativeness and being an entrepreneur. And so I just wanted to thank you for spending the time with us today and being a leader in our industry. And I've always enjoyed the time that we get to spend together. And every time up in Chicago, I try to grab you at least for a quick lunch just to connect with you. So I appreciate you, buddy, and appreciate what you're doing for the industry.
Well, thank you, Tom, and ditto. I've been a fan of yours for a long time. You've been very generous and supportive of me and us with your time and your knowledge. Again, just, another example of Chad, same way. I mean, I met Chad just kind of pinging him and saying, "Hey, I've got this problem. Can you help me?" And the first time I talked to him, he was very generous with his time. And so, I assume that's kind of a sense of, hey, you got to pay it forward. And
that's right.
And it's the same thing with me. And I think the one thing I would like to say is what's important is to focus on the journey. Yes, the outcomes are important, right? In the end, the results matter. But they don't matter more than the journey. And if you're not in it for the right reasons, and if you don't enjoy it and find value and fulfillment in the journey, then nothing that we say here, Chad, is going to change that.
Right.
And you know, you're what you can control is your attitude. What you can control is your mindset. And that has a huge impact then on your teams and the rest of the folks that maybe look up to you and would depend on you for, and by you, I mean all of us that have been in this industry, for guidance and acknowledgement and encouragement to get into this industry. And so, you know, let's focus on the journey, enjoy the journey. Yes, there's important results we want to achieve on the other end, but it's not worth it if we don't do it for the right reasons and enjoy it along the way.
No, and I think you said it best when you said, you know, talking about people, we need to invest in each other, whether that investment is mentorship, whether that investment is working together on projects. It's not transactional, and you said that. There's no room for transactional relationships. What there's room for is real human people investment relationships, and I think you said that best. Well, thanks again.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, right?
That's right. Thanks again, Lobby, for being on. We're thrilled to have you. Thanks for everybody that's watching and listening out there, and we will be back in a week with another podcast of our experience. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Lobby.
Bye, guys.
See ya.